So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual event, Return to the Workplace, a Young Leader's Point of View. I am Natalie Duncan-Sletton. I am this year's president for the Cornet Young Leaders. And thank you all very, very much for joining us this morning. I'll explain a little bit about how the morning will unfold in a minute. In the meantime, I just really wanted to remind everyone of the upcoming events that we have in the pipeline. So 14th of April, are you ready to kickstart your career? 15th of April, Young Leaders Networking event. 22nd of April, Occupy Insights. We'll be arranging an event in May for Flexible Working 2.0. And then we are also looking at organising a Young Leaders Summer Charity event. And all being well, it might even be an in-person event. So that's sort of what we're working towards. A little bit about the running of today. So of course, as you can glean from the title, we'll be discussing what it actually means for young leaders to return to the workplace, what the drivers are for and against. Also, we want this to be a very interactive session. So we encourage you to pop any questions or observations in the chat throughout the session. Also, we will be submitting some poll questions through the polling function within Webinar Jam, and also submitting some open questions in the chat for you to respond to. As you can see to the sort of the left of the slide, we have our annual sponsors, but also a very special thanks to Forefront Group, who have very kindly sponsored this event. And if you respond to all of the poll questions, you will then be eligible to win a luxury hamper from Fortnum and Mason. So one of you will be contacted after the event, and we'll make sure that that gets to you. So please do remain engaged and make sure that you are responding to all of the poll questions if you're interested in winning that prize. Fantastic. Okay, so I just want to make everyone aware that we are being recorded as part of this event. So just something for everyone to sort of be aware of. But now I will hand over to the panel and I will ask you all to introduce yourselves. So should we start with Saskia?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Saskia Lorison. I'm a workplace consultant at 360 Workplace. We are part of the Forefront Group, who, as Natalie mentioned, is sponsoring the event today. And I also head up our Next Gen community within Forefront Group.
Thank you. Locke?
Hi, Locke McKenzie, broadcasting from Munich, Germany, also as a representative of the Central European chapter of Cornet. I work for Deka Immobilien, which is a German-based investor landlord, and there I am the tenant liaison for our global office portfolio.
Wonderful, thank you. Holly?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Holly Pauline, and I'm a real estate manager from PwC. I'm also this year's Cornet Young Leader Vice President.
Thank you. Toby?
Hi, good morning. Toby Weitz. I run enterprise market solutions across EMEA for Collier's Occupy Services, and I'm also based in London.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm Natalie Duncan-Sletton. I am this year's UK Young Leader President. I also work for CBRE. I am the Client Solutions Lead for Enterprise Project Management for EMEA. Fantastic. So let's get right into the discussion. So kind of our first question for everyone listening and for the panel is, do you want to return to the office? Yes or no? So I'm going to start the poll. If you guys could start to respond, engage as appropriate. And in the meantime, over to the panel. What are your thoughts about returning to the office? Do you want to return?
You can see the numbers jumping up on the side there. People saying yes. I agree. I'm really looking forward to going back into the office. Just, you know, for the separation between home and work, all of the good things that the office brings you. I'm really looking forward to going back.
Yeah, thanks so much, Saskia. Everyone who has worked with me knows that I'm a fairly extroverted person. I think I'm really missing the office and being around people and kind of getting the energy from my team and working kind of together with them. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to going back.
Is there anyone who doesn't want to go back to the office? Ask us, Toby.
Well, I agree. I think everyone wants to get back to the social aspect more than anything. But I think also because our jobs are based in, essentially offices are our business. So I think without offices, we'd all be out of jobs, which is more of a frightening thing. Yeah. So there's definitely an incentive to go back.
For sure.
And at the same time, I think I know this white wall behind me shows it very well, but I'm in our office today here in Munich. We've sort of been coming back semi-regularly for the last 2 months. Let's see how the third wave kind of develops here in Germany and whether that will remain so. But we have definitely seen that, some days I plan to go in and then I end up looking at my schedule and I have then 5 Zoom meetings on that day that are all going to be over an hour long. And then it no longer makes sense for me to go in the office. So it's also sort of about a prioritizing of what you have to do that day. Because, in our office, which is more agility based, sitting in one of these little phone booths for over an hour per Zoom call is just, it's not comfortable. It's a little bit of a sweat box. And, you end up clogging them up because everybody's on Zoom calls right now. So that I think will play a big factor, at least in this sort of near term, before everybody kind of returns and everybody's doing in-person meetings. Yeah. How our days and how effective our office is.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's how, not if, and how to set up the office to, work in your favor for the new way of working. I mean, we're not set up for the new technological platform at all, and that's going to be key to getting people back. And it's also, I think, role dependent. I mean, a lot of roles might go completely remote, and the collaborative roles would come back into the office.
I just think from what we've been experiencing, with clients trying to figure out how their space is going to look, this exact question, employees just want it to be flexible. They just want to be able to choose when they come back to the office and what they're going to do when they're in their office. So I suppose it's just a case of the office providing you with, as Toby just said, the variety of spaces that you need to get to do what you need to do in the office that day. But I don't think people are quite ready to commit to, I'm going to be in on a Tuesday and a Thursday, because everyone's diary changes week by week. But I think they just want the flexibility, the choice and flexibility, and how and when they come back to work.
Yeah, indeed. And I think, just picking up some of the questions from the chat, choice is important, absolutely, flexibility, and we'll touch on that a little bit more detail further on. Also, what return to the office, what does the office really mean anymore? It's so true. What is the office? And I think, again, we'll get into that a bit further on. And as Toby and Locke said, the office is no longer really set up for our new ways of working, which is spending a lot of time on Zoom calls, etc. So it'll be very interesting to see how the workplace evolves to accommodate that. So obviously, as you can see from the poll, 87%, the majority do want to return to the office, and that's kind of in line with what we've experienced on the panel today. So moving on to our next poll question, it's kind of sort of around why do we actually want to return to the office? What do you feel that you get from the workplace that you simply can't get working from home? So here we've listed some things. If you feel there's anything that isn't sort of covered here, please feel free to post it in the chat as well. But we sort of listed social interaction, equipment and workstation setup, ability to collaborate with colleagues, access to nearby amenities, gym, dry cleaners, hospitality, and also the ability to learn from the colleagues. So this is something very important for our young leaders who are still developing and growing in their careers. And it's something that's not always easy done remotely. So over to you guys. What do you feel that you can get from the workplace that you can't get working from home?
I mean, I would respond to this with Holly, I'd respond to this with the ability to learn from other colleagues. I think that's something that I really have been missing out on, and it's something that I've been very aware of. And there was an article I read recently, actually, that, for our generation, as millennials, we want to come back to the office. But the people that we want to be learning from, who are, the older generations, they don't want to come back to the office. So actually, who are we going to be learning from when we are in the office? So I think there needs to be that I think we can't just rely on the office for that to be the place where the learning and the training and the development happens. It needs to be a two-way thing between you and your manager to constantly ask for feedback, do that progression. I always call up my manager after a meeting we've been on together and I say, how did I do? Did you think I said anything, horrific or whatever? But it's just, you have to take that onus on you now to really get that feedback loop going, I think, because at the moment I'm sure some people have probably gone months and months without the office being there. So that would be my one, is the ability to learn.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. And when I kind of studied for my APC a couple of years ago, I think the conversations you have in the office, kind of off the cuff and kind of in the environment, listening to people, you pick up so much from that, and you can be next to your colleagues and ask something quickly rather than now you have to pick up the phone or send kind of a Teams message or whatever platform you use to have that conversation. So it feels less natural. But I think looking at the poll, it's quite interesting to see that kind of the ones scoring the highest are the ability to collaborate and social interaction, which I think is a real key theme here, is just to be around people and to have that kind of natural interaction you do in the office.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of the sort of obvious win that we get from going to the office. I notice that sort of every time I come in, just this easy exchange with the colleagues is great, and it makes my life so much easier. I come in directly to do that. Looking at the poll, this sort of highlights something for me as a landlord, putting my landlord goggles on a bit, that also raises some big questions about how we're going to use the office and how we as landlords are going to have to create these offices in the future. When you see that there's nobody that's going to be coming to the office for nearby amenities, the whole concept of the office 18 months ago was this is going to be an amenities-based workplace where you offer your employees everything that they need to get through their day, because that allows them this work-life balance that they're now in large getting by being able to stay at home. So I think that will be a really big question that I think nobody has the answer to yet. And I'm going to remain hopeful that amenities will still be alive and well when the offices open back up. But it is a big question. How will we be using also not just our direct office, our direct demise, but the rest of the space sort of surrounding that office?
It's interesting because what we've been thinking about the future of the office and what does it mean? And actually we can all do our jobs from home now. So why do I need to go into the office? For the most part, we can do our jobs from home. And actually, we keep talking about creating this destination space where you come to it for the day and you can get your dry cleaning done. You can go to the gym. You can go and do a weekly shop if you needed to. And you're not just going to the office for the desk anymore. You need to go for all of these other reasons too. So it sort of goes against what the poll is saying here, is actually, would that be something we need to be considering going forward in the offices, fitting in the gyms? I heard of one client doing a dog walking service at lunchtime if you wanted to bring your dog into the office for the day, for example. So, like you say, creating this destination space, what else can we be offering people? Because I could do my job at home.
But they've been offering that service or those kind of services for years at offices. But I think it's definitely the social interaction. I mean, the poll it seems to be jumping, or it's now
it's gone down.
It's equal collaboration. So I think we've had quite a huge growth team over the last year and a half, and it's as good as the technology is, it's still not on a par with collaborating in person. It's quite hard to build a team remotely and make those connections. So I think social interaction is super high on the list.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting observing the results. I think it's definitely social interaction and ability to collaborate with colleagues, which arguably is one of the same, and then closely followed by learning from other colleagues as well, which inevitably kind of happens with the first two as well. And I think just picking up some of the points from the chat, all five, I think absolutely, of course, all of them are important in different ways. And I think as well, it's all about social interactions. And I think it's a really important point as well that Susanna is making, around childcare and, really enabling the workplace to be somewhere suitable for families, whether that be, with your dogs or children, whatever that might look like. I think it's very important that companies start to accommodate that as well. So just to briefly shift gears slightly, and then we'll delve into a little bit more sort of what the workplace of the future does look like. We just really wanted to sort of get a feel from everyone around sort of when we actually do want to go back to the office, which we've agreed that most of us will do, how much of our time do we actually want to be spending at the office? So do we want it to be full-time home working, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 or more days a week, or full-time? So whilst we see the polls come in, over to our panel, interesting to hear from you guys what your personal expectations are in returning to the office.
I think I'm quite keen to get back more than 3 days a week. I need a bit of structure, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, the ability to work from home well does really rely on, managing your distractions at home and managing your time at home. And I do think that, for some, like I know some people who have tried to stay in the office as much as possible throughout the past year just to give them that structure, because it's just, they just need it and they're just used to it, having the structure from the office.
Yeah, I think so. I think I will go back kind of 3 or more days a week. I've been in a couple of times this year already, but I think it's about balancing kind of what you've got on that week. And I know personally, I'll probably kind of consolidate my internal meetings to days I'm going to be in the office so that I can meet face to face with all of those people. But I guess with a lot of people, it depends on travel and other commitments. But yeah, definitely raring to get back 3 days or more. Yeah.
Mm. I think it's interesting for me because I live a little bit further away from my offices, I think, than, well, I say most people, but it's an hour for me to get to our regional office. And so I think that, I know we'll be talking about the future of working and travel for work, but just considering that commute, that hour in the morning and the hour in the afternoon, everyone's been saying they miss that commute, but actually for me, I'm thinking, I'm seeing my time differently, and I'm thinking that hour equals a meeting. That could be a meeting, or that could be something else more productive than just traveling just for the sake of going to the office. So I think that it's all well and good saying, I want to be back 2 to 3 days a week in the office. And, ideally that's what I would be saying. But when it comes down to it, I'll wake up in the morning and think I could just sit down and start working right now rather than have to travel an hour and then come back again.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems like there's an absolute consensus here. The majority want to go into the office more than 2 or 3 days a week, which is, very, very much in line with your experience and very much in line as well with, the things that we've been discussing that we are sort of missing from the office as well. Just again, to pick up some of the messages in the chat. So Cheryl is saying that interested in social interaction is so important right now because the lack of it for such a long time. Maybe when everything goes back to normal and we are socializing with our normal social groups, that the need for that will lessen. But I do think my personal view is obviously you end up spending most of your life with your waking hours with your colleagues. So having that rapport is very important. Also, Kirsty is saying, if you stay at home all the time, how do you keep being creative, learn to interact, negotiate? I really do resonate with this one. I feel that, the best kind of ideas and thinking outside of the box is very hard to do when you are always in the box of your house. Definitely align with that one. And Graham saying, of course, we have to adapt the working pattern to what's on our calendar. Absolutely. This is an interesting one from Edward, and maybe one that I'll pass on to the panel. How does a company deal with everybody wanting to work from home Monday and Friday, and then Tuesday to Thursday, the office is going to be at full capacity? Because obviously we are discussing, are we going to need reduced capacity overall? How do we deal with that? I think, in the view of obviously being at full capacity before the lockdown, I think current capacities should probably be able to deal with that. But for example, some companies have been getting certain groups to go in Tuesdays and Thursdays and other groups to go in sort of Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. So it'd be interesting to see kind of what's your experience and how do you think we could solve for this problem?
I mean, I would say that using technology here to try and maximize how your office is being used, using occupancy sensors and room booking systems, etc., just so you can start to preempt it. And that would be my thing, is just how can we check here? And there's great artificial intelligence companies being created, like Ghostface AI, for example. They've got this fantastic solution that can really help you prepare for what the next week of the office is going to look like, and actually where should people be sitting. So I think that technology, I mean, Toby's touched on it briefly, but I really think that this is just the beginning of how tech is going to take over the workplace.
I think there's also sort of, ways to, I would say two things on this point that have, I guess, nothing to do with technology. But one is, I think there's this inherent bias in all of us that we think I want to go in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and therefore that's what everybody wants to do. But I think there are also, I've had conversations with a number of colleagues who, for example, want to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, Tuesday, or Monday, Thursday, because, that's a good way for them to start their week, is to go in on a Monday. And I think the other way you can kind of incentivize that to get people to come in, because there's one, knowing when it's going to be most full, and the other is then reacting to that and creating a solution. And, I also know people who go in on Fridays because currently their only other option on a Friday evening is to sit at home alone, because we're locked down and they live alone. And they go in on Friday because, they can have then a happy hour drink with their colleagues in the office before they go home. And, incentivizing things like that, after work drinks on a Friday, maybe you get people to come in just with that.
Yeah.
So, because I definitely think there is the need to balance out that work week, so not everybody's just coming in on those bulk days.
Indeed. And I think there were a lot of comments as well around flexibility and being able to manage your own schedules. And I think that's something that is absolutely essential. So having a set pattern for every week might not work, because as we're saying, if you have back-to-back Zoom calls, there is literally no point in being in the office, because you won't be able to interact. And that's kind of what James is saying on the chat. Obviously, if everyone is just in the office on Zoom all day, we're not really gaining much from the experience. So I think that kind of flexibility will be absolutely key. Brilliant. So just sort of to move on to our next point in the poll. So we've been talking a lot about what does the workplace of the future look like? And I think I'm just going to pose this question in the chat, because we really struggle to obviously make this an open question, because as you can imagine, there's so many options. So we discussed a lot about the hotelification of the workplace, for it to be somewhere, with cafes and a spin studio and collaboration spaces where you come to interact and sort of also do or to tick off some of those amenities off the box that we want to be engaging with. The sort of lines of desks where everyone is sort of sat doing focused work, that might no longer be as relevant when we found that actually we can work very effectively on focused tasks at home. So over to you guys. What do you think the workplace of the future looks like?
Well, I think the co-working operators seem to have got it right a couple of years ago. I mean, they're naturally set up for different businesses within a floor, doing different tasks, people on calls, people collaborating. Most of our businesses don't have those spaces. We've got traditional big boardrooms, that fit 20 people, and those are pretty obsolete, and they're not set up for the technology. So I think it's educating people on etiquette, on how to be on calls, using earphones, having quiet spaces where you can collaborate with 1 or 2 or 3 colleagues, and still plug into a meeting where someone's using Zoom or Teams in a remote location.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I think because we're likely to move towards a hybrid model where we're going to have people working from home and people physically in the office, I think it's really important that we've got the space and the technology in place so that those that are in the office and those that are working remotely feel like they really are still connected, and there isn't a sense of, well, you're working from home and with bad internet connection. I think we need to make sure that, we're creating space where people can collaborate. But I also think that we're going to and I think some organisations and occupiers have already started doing this in terms of task appropriate work settings, because I think whilst we're moving away from having traditional rows of desks, and we have been for a long time, I think the pandemic has shown us that some of us have benefited from having a good working setup at home and are quite comfortable here, whereas I think others are sat on their dining table, sat in their bedrooms, shared living situations. And I think it's still important that we provide quiet space for people you can't work kind of and do concentrated work at home, have the ability to then do that in the office.
I totally agree with that. I think when this all first kicked off last year, our initial reaction to, you know, working from home was that the office would just be for collaboration and you would just go there to socialise. But, you know, third lockdown in now, we're starting to notice that actually, you know, as Toby mentioned, it's going to be that total variety of, you know, you just go in and you can find somewhere that's going to suit the work that you need to do that day. I'm also been very interesting, and you know, it's been interesting to see what the different furniture solutions that have come out of this has been, because there's a lot that the furniture can do now in the space, and the different, you know, quiet pods that exist and like the COVID safe collaboration spaces that you can now have. So that's been interesting, and I think that it'll be great to see over, you know, the next 12 months what other furniture solutions come out to help keep our office to be flexible, you know, using modular walls and whiteboard walls, etc. And, you know, movable tables so you can move your collaboration space wherever you wanted it to be. So I think that's been interesting to see.
Yeah, I think another question that we as landlords sort of pose to ourselves is, you know, this idea of whether the workplace is going to be centralized or decentralized. You know, I think we sort of still see a lot of potential, or potential. We see the future still being very centralized, where you have sort of your main campus somewhere in the inner city, and that's where the people go travel to. That's the destination where you go to work if you're not going to work from home. But you know, it leaves us sort of scratching our heads a lot of the time when you know, some of the big consulting agencies and some of the big serviced office companies are really putting a lot of bets on this idea of a hub and spoke model, where there's going to be offices that are also decentralized. I don't fully understand it. If I'm completely honest, it just seems to be dispersing the workforce further. But maybe other people have other opinions on that.
Yeah, I've been interested in this hub and spoke idea because, like I mentioned, being slightly further away from my office, I was thinking it'd be great if I could have somewhere that wasn't my kitchen, but was somewhere that I could go and work without having to travel the hour. And I think it relies on, you know, co-working spaces to open up perhaps a lot more regional areas, because I think at the moment, you know, the spaces, for example, of the world, they're all quite consolidated around London, whereas actually maybe we need to see them come out to the slightly less obvious cities. Like, for example, I'm in Winchester, and that's not particularly like considered to be a commuter town perhaps. So I think there needs to be a lot more of that throughout the country. And then it relies on the company, your company, to then pay for your membership to that co-working space. So I could just go and use the one in Winchester, for example, rather than coming to the office. But then, you know, then it's just an hour, and then I want to go see my colleagues, and I want to go and learn from my colleagues, and no one else from my company lives in Winchester, so I'll just be there by myself, and I may as well just be an hour up the road with the rest of my company. So I also think I struggle with the hub and spoke model. I think that's probably better suited to people who, like, you know, commute from Manchester to London or something, perhaps, as more of a drastic example.
Locke, do you not think you'll be hamstrung on how much change you can do in Germany by workers' councils and, you know, regulations?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we would definitely to change the workplace and especially to really implement. Let me go back. The Works Council in Germany are definitely a hurdle to really quick, big changes. They're not completely problematic, and I think, especially in this crisis, they have seen sort of the need to sort of flex with the employers and employees, especially as they've seen that you know, acceptance of sort of this hybrid model of working has been quite high. You know, I think that's one thing. If you're kind of referring to it in terms of a more dispersed workforce model, you know, there I see less opportunities. I think you'll have a lot of sort of data protection issues in terms of that, but I also see maybe less need in a city like Munich, or, you know, German cities in general are between 1 and 2 million people, you know, with Berlin being 3 million at the largest. You know, you don't have this like massively dispersed workforce where people are commuting hours to get to work. That just doesn't happen. And therefore, you know, deciding to come into the office and, you know, traveling 15 minutes instead of 25 minutes because there's a co-working center 15 minutes from me. That logic just doesn't really play.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a very sort of, it could be a very specific London problem where a lot of people have sort of a 2-hour commute, and it's been quite interesting to see during these times how cafes or hotels have actually been turning themselves into or promoting themselves as co-working spaces, and maybe that is the solution to the hub and spoke model. You find somewhere local, close to your home, which allows you to just sort of extract yourself from the home environment, but still has that kind of convenience. And then 1, 2, 3 days a week go into kind of the mothership HQ where you can interact with your colleagues as well. Lots of different views on how what that could look like. Just pick up on some points in the chat. Ben sort of says that we've invested a lot in sort of the virtual technology solutions. How can we then justify that and also encourage people to return to the office? Very, very interesting point. Matt says much more driven towards activities, collaboration spaces, and also absolutely very good point. We need meeting rooms that are equipped for people in the room, but then can also loop in those working from home. And I think that's something that, at the moment doesn't really work very effectively. So an area for investment for sure. James, a cafe style environment with specific meeting spaces of different sizes. Focus work can be undertaken at home. Yeah, absolutely. Lisa says an omni-channel approach to connecting virtual and physical placemaking with a retail or hospitality offering, sort of draw people back into the office. So lots of similar responses here. Very flexible space, kind of activity-based workspace. Absolutely. Matt, I think Matt makes a very good point. I think here we're very thinking about the huge corporates, but he's bringing up sort of the mid caps and the smaller traditional companies. The offices probably will remain very, very much the same. Smaller open plan offices with manager offices and boardrooms, and maybe the larger companies will have more collaborative areas, including those kind of amenities as well. Andrew, I love this one. Should we rethink the happy hour structure and move to Monday night post-work drinks? I mean, that could work, but then we might notice that on Tuesday there's a stark decrease in productivity levels, but thinking outside the box, brilliant. And then Lars, so I think, Lars is absolutely right. A lot of this does depend on what kind of people we are. Are you an introvert? Is your best work done in your cocoon, or do you respond better with sort of interaction, etc.? So and I think, yes, Celine, great point. The future workplace will be a hub for occupiers' brand and culture, a place to collaborate, socialize, and I think this is going to be a really key sort of draw to attracting new talent as well. I think the workplace will really be a key driver for that. So yeah, some really great points in there. Thank you all for your engagement. Okay, so shifting gears slightly again, one of the sort of next questions that we have for you is around the future of business travel. So I know that all of us on the panel today used to travel a lot for work prior to the pandemic. Some trips were essential and helpful. Other ones probably not so much. So it's interesting to see what everyone thinks will happen to business travel. Will it cease to exist? Will it be significantly reduced, or do we think it will remain pretty much unchanged in the long term? So
I don't think it'll cease to exist, but I think we definitely travel too much. We kind of travel for the sake of traveling. I mean, cross border or cross London, and the amount of time wasted, I think, on all that traveling to just to appease clients, I think that's dead. And I think ESG is also going to put a spanner in that works. But I think it's so important to see when clients are important and there's something worth going to, we should definitely travel for it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Oh, sorry, go on, Holly.
No, so I absolutely agree. I think, when we come out of kind of lockdown 3 that we're in now, and we're post-COVID I do think there will be an even bigger focus on ESG than we've ever seen. And I do think it will be a case of, you know, if you've got a meeting that is outside of your base location, understanding whether you need to go and have that meeting face to face, or whether you can have it productively using technology. And from a sustainability standpoint, you know, do we need to be flying or getting on that train and so on, as you know, as organizations really push hard on their own kind of net zero targets. So I agree. But I do think, to your point, Toby, in terms of ceasing to exist, I think there is some meetings which probably do need to happen face to face. I think, you know, everyone on this call has probably needed to go to a site inspection or something at some point, and that's quite hard to do virtually. So I think it's about understanding whether, you know, that meeting can take place virtually or not.
I think, you know, when we've been looking at this question previously, I've always considered it to be, you know, international travel, but actually thinking just about like London, how much time do I spend traveling around London, like getting into London, traveling then around London, and then coming home from London? I wonder if I added up those hours, how far I probably could have actually traveled in that day. If I had, you know, 5 hours worth of travel or something, that could have taken me to Italy. So I think things like that are gonna, like I'm really going to be rethinking about my days in London, and I feel like I'm in a lot more control of those disruptions to my diary. You know, 2 hour door to door to get from here to my London office. I'm really going to be thinking about that, whereas before I would be doing it, you know, 2 to 3 times a week without even thinking twice about it. But now I really think that, you know, like I say, the way that I think I'm perceiving my time is different, and thinking rather than just spending 2 hours on a train, I could be, I don't know, going for a walk, doing some work, doing errands or whatever. So I think that it will just be reduced, because like we said, there are just some things that cannot be done virtually.
Yeah, and I think beyond the sort of, you know, the practicality of visiting a site, it could be something, you know, such as meeting a client or colleague that lives in another country. It's very difficult to form, you know, significant sort of business bonds with someone unless you've actually sort of met them in person. So I do think that, you know, I agree. I think that it will definitely be significantly reduced, but there are, you know, some meetings and some instances in which business travel is still going to remain essential. And I think, you know, some great comments in the chat. The question we could ask is, what added value would I bring being physically present rather than at a distance? And I think as long as we ask ourselves that question before undertaking any kind of business travel, then we'll be in a much better position. Interesting point from Ben. In the consultancy world, a lot of people see travel as a perk, exciting part of the job, maybe a little bit until it becomes every week, and then probably less so. I wonder if there's a risk that people start over traveling to compensate. I mean, potentially, but I do think that I think everyone will be really, really questioned on sort of the business travel that they do book. You know, is it essential? What am I going to really add by being there in person? So anyway, interesting to see how this unfolds over the next few months as things start to return to normal. Great. So I just want to ask a new sort of open question to the chat and to you guys. So it's around sort of what new habits and routines have we gained from this time that we actually think have been positive and that we want to keep and retain when the world goes back to normal. So I think from my point of view, I managed to develop a daily meditation practice, something I never could even conceive having time to do before. And I really do hope to carry that on when things go back to normal. So what about you? Over to the panel.
The one that I've been thinking about this quite a bit over the past few weeks, and I really think that, yes, getting on top of, you know, having time in the mornings. And there was actually an article on the BBC about this, about how we now all have time for breakfast, whereas people probably before we never had time for breakfast, but now we all do. So things like that I think are really lovely. I hope they stick. But in terms of the habits, I think it's this like level of empathy and like camaraderie that we have for our colleagues, that we've literally been given a window into their lives through the screen. And it's kind of made that connection with your colleagues one step a bit more personal than perhaps it was, you know, this time a year ago. And, you know, how many colleagues' children have I met, and how many colleagues' pets have I met, and so on and so forth. And I think that it just makes you feel that little bit closer, even though we are not together. So I think that I'd like to keep that level of empathy and camaraderie up as we go forward, because I think it just, you know, it's only a good thing, in my opinion.
That's a nice sentiment.
Thank you.
I don't think I've picked up any good habits at all. I think I want to return.
I think for me, it sounds silly, but it's more just the walking, in that it seems ridiculous that, you know, we had in kind of an hour or, you know, once a day imposed exercise this time kind of last year, that it made me get out and walk. I think midweek before I would have gotten to the office, you know, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, left at 5, kind of done my journey home and wouldn't have gone for an hour walk. And I think that's something that I'd really like to keep up and kind of have a bit more fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like I've struggled with this question a little bit because my life has become so different with with COVID, and especially I was traveling probably somewhere around 100 to 150 days a year before the COVID sort of jumped in here, and with that, my life was always pretty flexible. It was kind of just building time for me around everything else that I was doing. But I think one thing that now, perhaps without the travel and a little bit more of a normal structured day, one thing that I've been trying to build in for me, which was always sort of automatically built in, was really this time to think. And so I've really, you know, it's so easy to have your calendar get filled up with, I think we've talked about this quite a bit internally, that with just, you know, like Zoom meetings, one after the other. And, you know, I've really started taking pieces of my calendar and blocking them for me so that I can sort of start thinking about, you know, you have sort of the mini targets for the year, but you also have sort of the big ones. And if you don't schedule the time for those, then they don't happen. And so I had to start forcing that. And sometimes at the most productive part of my day, which is the one people want to talk to you the most in. So you're kind of in conflict with some of your other stakeholders in order to do that as well.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that's very much the theme in the chat as well. I think it's all about having more time. So Graham doesn't need to get up at 5:30. I think we're probably all getting a lot closer to 8 hours sleep, which is fantastic. Spending more time outside, better exercise routine. Love my new morning routine, exercise, focus hours. Going for a walk every morning. So I think that is, you know, one thing that we've all gained from this time, and hopefully we'll be able to carry into our our lives as things start to go back to normal. Brilliant. So kind of on that point, you know, it seems like we definitely have a lot of positives that we've gained from this time in terms of having time for ourselves and for self-care. However, I think the flip side of that is that in this kind of virtual world where our homes are our offices, the kind of line between work and personal life has become a lot more blurred. And some of us, guilty, might be more sort of propense to checking the emails late at night or over the weekend. So overall, do you feel that the sort of the pandemic and the new ways of working have improved or deteriorated your work-life balance?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, I mean, everyone says they're getting out for walks and things like that, but I would think my work-life balance has definitely deteriorated. I mean, there's no hard stop to the day. I know, Nat, you've had really early starts. I mean, there's no reason to switch off at the moment, which is not a great thing. But then again, I enjoy the flexibility. So, no, I don't knock it. Like I like being able to work when I want to work, and you know, if I want to take an extra hour to do something I want to do, it's great.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to think about this question in terms of we're in a pandemic, which means that I haven't seen my family since before Christmas, and I haven't seen my friends since longer. So I think that side of things, my work-life balance is massively deteriorated. However, like we say, having that extra time in the morning or in the afternoon, I think it's like the numbers on the poll, it's 60-40. I'm surprised that's not like 50-50, because I think that, you know, we're not doing the things that would usually keep us sane, like going to the gym, going to the cinema, etc. But at the same time, it's this element of time, and like being able to sleep makes us think that our balance is better. But really, is it? I don't know. I'd question it. I would probably say deteriorated. Numbers are jumping now. There we go.
I think as Lot said, I mean, like, controlling your diary, I mean, it's quite important, taking time for yourself. And I mean, I struggle with that. I don't really know how to do it, but it seems like a good idea.
Block out an hour for a walk. We were actually encouraged to do that in January. You know, we were told to block out an hour at lunch to go for a walk. And so no one can really put that time in. And I think it's just getting to be a bit more, you know, bold with your diary and just blocking out 8 hours to do work if you needed to, because how else is it going to get done? And if people see a gap, they'll fill it. If it's a half hour, they'll fill it. And that's when you just get this back-to-back meetings all day. So I think being bold and putting in hour-long meetings at hour-long walks, at lunchtime or something, I think is good. We're on 50-50 now.
We are. I think yeah, I mean, it's really, really interesting because I think it is 50-50. I think our life work balance has improved in some ways and deteriorated in others. You know, just to pick up on some of the messages from the chat, you know, more time to focus on ourselves is great, but I'm eating more, so I need to exercise more. You know, and so it is really about that sort of that balance, and it's yeah, better in some ways, worse in others. But thank you. So we're at time today, a little bit over time. I just really wanted to thank the panel so much for your engagement, and thank you so much for everyone who engage with the polls, engage with the chat. As we mentioned earlier, a lucky one of you will be contacted and will be receiving a luxury Fortnum & Mason's hamper. So yeah, just really thank you. We hope you've taken some good insights from today. We'll be sending around the recording of today's session. And yes, just thank you again for your engagement, everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks everyone.
Great day all. Thank you.
Bye.